What's up, guys? Golden Knight here. Have you ever spent hours staring at a blank screen, feeling like you've completely lost the ability to create anything? That sense of creative emptiness that seems to drain all your motivation, making you question whether you were truly born for this? The truth is that there are very specific reasons why you get stuck, and each one is rooted in silent beliefs you carry about art, about yourself, and about what it means to be creative. These beliefs act like invisible locks in your process, blocking the flow before you even pick up the pencil. I've separated 9 hard but liberating truths that every beginner artist needs to hear. They're not empty motivational advice. They are practical realities that, once you finally accept them, completely change the way you create. You are not blocked, you are afraid. When you say you're blocked, what is really happening underneath that word? Think about it. You sit down to draw, the idea is actually in your head. You pick up the pencil, look at the paper, and suddenly everything freezes. If you manage to create something, it looks terrible. You erase it, try again, and the result is even worse. You throw the pencil on the table and think, I can't do anything anymore, I'm blocked. But it's not a block. It's fear. Fear that the result won't be good enough. Fear of wasting time on something that will disappoint. Fear of proving to yourself that maybe you're not as good as you imagined. That fear disguises itself as a lack of inspiration, tiredness, or disinterest. But deep down, it's pure terror of failing. This fear is completely normal. Every artist feels it. The difference between those who create and those who don't isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to create even while feeling it. Professional artists don't wake up every day inspired and confident. They wake up, feel the same knot in their stomach that you do, and do the work anyway. Because they understand that fear is part of the process. Creativity and fear go hand in hand. They always have. If you wait for fear to go away before you start creating, you will never create anything. It's that simple. Creative block is, most of the time, a protection mechanism for your ego. Your brain would rather convince you that you can't create right now than let you create something bad and have to deal with the disappointment. It's more comfortable to say, I have no ideas, than to admit, I'm afraid to try and fail. But comfort is the killer of art. Every time you choose comfort, you choose not to evolve. And growth in art comes precisely from facing that discomfort, from putting on paper something that may not turn out perfect, from accepting that the process is messy and scary. Inspiration comes during the process. There is a romantic lie that all of us buy into at some point in our artistic journey. The idea that real artists are touched by a magical force called inspiration, and only then do they create incredible works. You imagine the artist sitting, staring out the window, when suddenly a beam of light illuminates their mind and, just like that, the masterpiece begins to flow. It's a beautiful image. It's also completely false. Inspiration doesn't work like that. It doesn't knock on your door and say, "Hi, I came to help you create today." In fact, it barely shows up when you're standing still waiting for it. Inspiration is shy. It only appears when you're already working. Think about it. How many times were you drawing something random, with no pressure, and suddenly had an amazing idea? How many times were you in the middle of a boring study and thought of something completely different you wanted to try? That's not a coincidence. That's how creativity works. It needs movement to exist. It's like pushing a car. At first it's heavy, difficult, you feel like it's not going to move. But once it starts rolling, it gets easier. Inspiration is the momentum that comes after you've already started pushing, not before. Beginner artists wait to feel like creating. And while they wait, days go by. Weeks go by. Sometimes months. And nothing. Because they're waiting for something that only comes when you act. It's a cruel cycle. You don't create because you're not inspired, and you don't get inspired because you're not creating. The only way to break this cycle is to force the first movement. Pick up the pencil even when you don't feel like it. Scribble anything. Make a circle. Draw a line. It doesn't matter. What matters is starting. You are consuming too much and creating too little. How many hours did you spend today looking at other people's art? Scrolling through Instagram, watching speed paints on YouTube, saving references on Pinterest, admiring the incredible work of that artist you follow? Now answer me this. How many hours did you spend today creating your own art? The difference between those two numbers is exactly the size of your problem. We live in the era of artistic overexposure. It has never been easier to see amazing art. It's everywhere, all the time, one click away. And it feels good, it feels productive, it feels like you're feeding yourself creatively. But in reality, you're drowning. You're filling your brain with input without leaving any room for output. When you consume too much art, your brain enters a passive state. You become a spectator of other people's creativity and forget to be the creator of your own. Worse than that, you start comparing yourself in a negative way. You see that perfect drawing, that flawless painting, and look at your own work thinking it's garbage. Why try if you'll never reach that level? Why start if the result will be so inferior? That's the trap. Creating your own art makes you grow. But you traded growth for comfort. It's easier to watch than to do. Less risky. The brain has a limited capacity to process creative information. When you fill it with references, tutorials, inspiration, and other artists' work, there's no room left for your own ideas. It's like trying to hear your inner voice in a room full of people shouting. Impossible. You need creative silence. You need empty space where your ideas can breathe, take shape, and gain substance. And that space only exists when you stop consuming and start creating. I'm not saying you should never look at other people's art. I'm saying you need balance. And today, that balance is completely broken. Your creative block isn't a lack of ideas. It's an excess of noise. Silence the world and start creating. Perfection is a poison you drink every day. You think you're being selective, that you're maintaining high standards, that you're refusing to create something mediocre. But in reality, you're sabotaging yourself. Perfectionism is not the pursuit of excellence. It's fear disguised as high standards. It's a sophisticated excuse to never finish anything. Because if you never finish, you never have to face the final result and admit that it isn't perfect. And so you get stuck in an endless loop of restarts, always thinking that next time it will turn out better, and never allowing anything to fully exist. Here's the truth no one tells you: your bad drawings are more valuable than your perfect sketches. A finished drawing, even full of mistakes, teaches you 10 times more than a drawing abandoned halfway because you froze trying to get every detail right. When you finish something, even if it's imperfect, you go through every stage of the creative process. You make decisions. You solve problems. You see where you went wrong and understand why. But when you abandon it, you learn nothing. You only reinforce the belief that you're not good enough. And that belief paralyzes you even more the next time you try. There's a concept every artist should tattoo in their mind: done is better than perfect. Because done exists. Done can be analyzed, criticized, improved next time. Perfect is an illusion. It doesn't exist. It never will. Even the greatest artists in the world look at their work and see flaws. The difference is that they finished. They put it out into the world. They didn't let the fear of imperfection stop the work from existing. And that's exactly why they grew. Growth doesn't come from making one perfect thing. It comes from making 100 imperfect things and learning from each one of them. Think about how many drawings you've abandoned. How many projects died in the sketch phase because you decided they weren't worth continuing. Now imagine if you had finished all of them. Even the bad ones. Even the ugly ones. Even the ones far from what you imagined. You would have a huge stack of completed work. And do you know what that means? Experience. Every finished drawing is a lesson. Every completed project is a step upward. But you traded those steps for the fantasy that one day you'll create something perfect on the first try. And while you wait for that day that never comes, you don't climb at all. Make a pact with yourself. For the next 30 days, you will finish everything you start. It doesn't matter if it's turning out terrible. It doesn't matter if you hate the result halfway through. You will finish. Because the goal is not to create masterpieces. It's to build the habit of completing. It's to train your brain not to quit when things get hard. You don't need more tutorials, you need more practice. How many tutorials have you watched? How many courses have you started? How many videos with tips and techniques have you saved, promising yourself you'd apply them later? Now tell me, how many of those lessons have you actually put into practice at least once? The truth hurts, but it needs to be said. You're not in creative block because you lack knowledge. You're blocked because you've become a collector of information instead of a practitioner of art. There's a very comfortable illusion that forms when you consume educational content, the feeling that you're progressing. You watch a tutorial on anatomy and feel like you've learned. You see a speed paint with new techniques and feel like you've absorbed something. But feeling like you learned and actually learning are two completely different things. Real learning only happens when you fail trying to apply what you saw. The problem is that watching is easy. Practicing is hard. When you watch, you're in passive mode. Comfortable. Nothing can go wrong. But when you practice, you expose your limitations. You make mistakes. You get frustrated. You realize that understanding something in theory and being able to execute it in practice are two completely different things. So you run back to tutorials. One more video. One more course. One more lesson. And the cycle continues. You accumulate knowledge that never turns into skill because skill is built only through repetition, through mistakes, through the experience of trying and failing and trying again. And here's the most ironic part. Creative block often comes precisely from information overload. You've watched so many different artists with different styles, different techniques, that now you don't even know where to start. You have 10 painting methods in your head and master none of them. You know 15 ways to draw eyes but never practiced any of them long enough to get good. Your brain is saturated with options and freezes. Because decision requires clarity, and what you have is confusion. Stop searching for the perfect tutorial that will solve all your problems. It doesn't exist. What exists is you taking what you already know, however basic it may be, and applying it until you master it. Then you add one more layer, and another, and you build your skill brick by brick, instead of trying to raise the entire building at once. Knowledge without practice is the illusion of progress. Practice without knowledge will still take you further than you imagine. Because in practice, you discover things no tutorial will ever teach you. You develop your own way, your own solutions. And that is real growth. Your block is a lack of discipline disguised as a lack of creativity. I'm going to ask you a difficult question. When was the last time you created something without being inspired? Without feeling like it? Without that creative fire burning inside you? If it took you a while to answer, we've already found the problem. Beginner artists believe that creating is an act of passion. That you need to feel that special spark, that magical connection with the creative universe before you can produce something meaningful. And while you wait for that feeling, the days go by. Entire weeks without creating anything. Because the desire didn't show up. Because you weren't in the mood. Because creativity decided to take a vacation. But here is the raw truth. Creativity is work. It's not magic. It's not divine inspiration. It's sitting down and doing it even when everything inside you is screaming to do anything else. Discipline is the difference between someone who wants to be an artist and someone who is an artist. That's it. Everyone wants to create when they're inspired. That's easy, even pleasurable. The real challenge is creating when you're tired, bored, discouraged, when nothing seems to make sense and every line you draw feels worse than the last. That's when discipline steps in. That's when you prove to yourself that you're serious about this. Because anyone can create when it's easy. But only those with discipline create when it's hard. And it's precisely in difficulty that you grow the most. Think about any skill you respect. A musician who plays their instrument incredibly well. An athlete at the peak of performance. Did they get there by practicing only when they felt inspired? Of course not. They practiced every day. Even on bad days. Even when they didn't want to. Even when it felt like they weren't improving. They trusted the process. Art is no different. You don't become a good artist by creating only when you're inspired. You become a good artist by creating consistently, regardless of how you feel. Because volume matters. Repetition matters. And you only generate volume and repetition when you have discipline. Creative block loves the absence of routine. It thrives in chaos. When you don't have a set time to create, when you only draw when you feel like it, you give procrastination total power. Because there will always be something more urgent, more important, more attractive. There will always be an excuse. But when you establish a routine, when you decide that every day at 7 in the evening you will draw for 1 hour no matter what happens, you remove the power of choice. It's no longer about desire. It's about commitment. And commitment doesn't negotiate with mood. You follow through because you promised yourself. And every time you follow through, you become stronger. Start small. 15 minutes a day. Every single day. No exceptions. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece. It can be a quick sketch. A proportion study. An experimental scribble. The result doesn't matter as much as the act of showing up. Because when you show up every day, you train your brain to understand that creating is not optional. It's part of who you are. And then inspiration starts to appear more often. Because it realizes you're always there, ready to work. And creativity always rewards consistency. You are trying to skip steps that cannot be skipped. There is a mistake that practically every beginner artist makes, and it is deadly to creative progress. You look at an incredible artist, see those complex illustrations full of detail, with dynamic compositions and vibrant colors, and think, that's what I want to create. So you open a blank sheet of paper and try to produce exactly that. without mastering basic proportions, without understanding perspective, without practicing tonal values. You want the final result without going through the process that leads you there. And when you inevitably fail, when the drawing turns into a mess that looks nothing like what you imagined, you feel blocked. Incapable. But it's not a block. It's just you trying to run before learning how to walk. Art has fundamentals. And fundamentals are boring. No one wakes up excited to draw 50 shaded spheres. No one wants to spend hours doing straight line exercises. You want to draw incredible characters, create fantastic worlds, tell visual stories. That's understandable. The problem is that without fundamentals, you have no foundation at all. The truth no one wants to accept is that you will need years drawing simple things before you can confidently create complex ones. Years studying basic anatomy before you can convincingly stylize bodies. Years understanding light and shadow before you can create emotional atmospheres. That's scary, because years feel like an eternity. You want results now. You want to feel good now. You want to create impressive art now. But skipping steps doesn't speed up the process. It only guarantees that you'll stay stuck in the same place, repeating the same mistakes, getting frustrated with the same problems, because you haven't built the foundation necessary to move forward. Look at any artist you admire. Go back to their early work. Find the drawings from when they were just starting. You'll discover pages and pages of basic studies. Geometric shapes. Simple gestures. Repetitive exercises. They went through the stages you're trying to avoid. And that's exactly why they reached where they are. There is no shortcut. There is no secret technique that replaces fundamental practice. You can have the most expensive brush, the most advanced tablet, the most complete tutorials. None of it matters if you don't master the basics. And mastering the basics requires the humility to accept that you need to start from the beginning. You are creating to impress others, not to express yourself. Answer honestly. When you think about creating something, is the first thing that comes to your mind, will people like this? If so, you've just identified one of the biggest killers of your creativity. You stopped creating art and started creating validation. Every choice you make goes through the invisible filter of other people's judgment. You don't draw what you want, you draw what you imagine will get likes. You don't experiment with what intrigues you, you play it safe, sticking to what you know people expect. And in the process of trying to please everyone, you completely lose your own voice. And without your own voice, you have nothing true to say. In this case, creative block isn't a lack of ideas. It's an excess of self-censorship. Before you even put the first line on paper, you're already imagining what people will think. Is this good enough to post? Will they understand what I'm trying to do? Will they compare me to better artists? Will they think I'm pretentious? And those imaginary voices paralyze you. Because you're not creating in the present. You're creating for a future judgment that hasn't even happened yet. You're trying to control how others will perceive your work before you even have something concrete to show. And that's impossible. You don't control how people will receive your work. But you do control whether you create or not. And when you make external approval a prerequisite, you simply stop creating. The works that truly move people are those that come from an authentic place, where the artist wasn't trying to please anyone, but simply expressing something real. It can be ugly. It can be strange. It may follow none of the established rules. But it has soul. It has honesty. And people feel that. You've probably seen technically perfect pieces that move you in no way at all. And works full of imperfections that give you chills. The difference isn't technique. It's intention. It's truth. And you don't access your truth when you're performing for an imaginary audience. Think about when you were a child. You drew without thinking about anything other than the pleasure of drawing. There were no expectations. No standards. No fear of judgment. You simply picked up the pencil and let out whatever wanted to come out. And you probably had much more fun. At some point in life, you learned that art has to be good. That it has to impress. That it has to fit some external standard of value. And that killed the spontaneity. Killed the joy. Killed the courage to experiment without knowing the outcome. You need to recover some of that child. Not the technical naivety, but the emotional freedom. Talent doesn't save you from a bad beginning. The beginning is bad for everyone. It doesn't matter if you've been drawing since childhood or if you've always been told you have talent. The start is clumsy, inconsistent, and frustrating, because that's when your taste is already better than your skill. This creates a huge internal conflict. You know how to recognize a good drawing, a good painting. And precisely because of that, you suffer when you look at what you produce. Your eye is already more trained than your hand. This mismatch is normal, but many people interpret it as a lack of talent and quit far too soon. The problem is that talent, when it exists, can actually get in the way at the beginning. It creates expectations. It makes you think you shouldn't make so many mistakes, that you shouldn't take so long, that you shouldn't feel so lost. But art doesn't follow that logic. It doesn't reward potential, it rewards presence and consistency. If this video helped you in any way, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next ones. Thanks so much for watching all the way through. Don't forget to take a look at the description. There are several important links there that can help you even more. See you in the next video.